So you made your script and you're ready to make it official. But before that, we should really double check our work and prime it for production. There are many things to watch out for, things like not repeating yourself with the same lines of code when you can just make them into functions. Also, don't query the same data multiple times when you've already queried it once before. Another thing to do is to be consistent and clear, whether it's your structure and formatting, not just your code, but I mean like dividing the sections as needed, and making good use of indentations and spacing. Even your choice of naming things like the variables and the function. And when you are going to query data, make sure that it is only collecting what you need and nothing else, especially when the data sets are going to become large. And when you're nesting within loops and if statements and all the rest, try not to nest endlessly, because when you nest deeply, you'll have to remember the context of each parent nest to understand what's happening in the code. If there's a part of it you can take outside the nest, do it. It just makes things more clear. And then when it comes to commenting, there's a balance between over commenting and targeted commenting. Comment so that when you stumble upon this script in the future, even years from now, it helps make things clear. Comment so that your colleagues can understand your code as well. And when you're commenting, don't just comment the code, perhaps document the script itself. Maybe have a comment block that explains a section, or a comment right at the top that explains the whole script. And when your script is running, have outputs. These outputs will almost tell a story of what's happening. This isn't just useful when you're running the script and watching it progress, but it also helps troubleshoot you when errors start popping up. So you'll know exactly at what stage the error occurred. And even when it's successfully collecting data, sometimes it's good to have insight into what it's collecting, because just because it collected data doesn't mean it's accurate. While we're at it, using PowerShell, just avoid using write host. I know they make it pretty and nice, but it's not for proper logging. Use write output, use write error, write warning, especially if you use it as a runbook in automation accounts, write host won't even work. And the most obvious one that requires no explanation, don't hard code your secrets and don't output your sensitive values. When you're making your scripts, make sure you have lots of good error handling, especially when you're doing things when, if gone wrong, are destructive or disruptive. Destructive are things that when they go wrong will cause issues in your environment, while disruptive are tasks that can perhaps interrupt someone's day. For example, in our script, we're sending out emails to users. Maybe don't do that during a test phase so they're not disrupted. Test against yourself, or be ready to tell them why you are sending all these people emails. How do you handle errors? Use things like what ifs, use TryCatch Blocks. You can even simulate changes as outputs instead of having an action being done. What I mean is, if you're going through this nested process all the way to a commandlet that's going to make a change, rather than making a change, you can just have write output with all the values that would go inside it, so that you can see when it goes through this whole process from the script and it gets to that stage, what it is that is going to actually feed that changed commandlet. Always good to see what's going to do before you say, okay, I'm just going to implement it. And if a variable is used across your script, why not just put it at the top once? It's a good way to indicate that this variable is across the whole script. You can keep variables as sections if they are for those sections, or if they're generated in those sections. And finally, just because something worked on your computer doesn't mean it's going to run from the production server where it's going to run from. So I have a PowerShell script that we developed, and I want to upload it for our order to use. Let's use today's episode to clean up with all these things I just mentioned and get it primed and ready. So why don't we begin? Okay, and we're back. This is our script from last episode. We were basically interacting with enter ID to get service principal's secret expiry, and we have it designed so that it's going to send emails out to all the owners whenever secrets are going to expire. Why don't we work on this and try to improve it so that it's production ready, and when it's ready, we'll deploy it to automation account. So there is a balancing act. You could endlessly keep making improvements to a script, but there is a point of over-engineering. You may not have the time or the flexibility to forever spend time on one particular script, so just do what you think is best. And if problems emerge, you can always go fix them down the road. So there are some things I've already done. Like in our authentication piece, I did add a try catch. One thing I will do here is, instead of doing a throw, I'm going to add write error. And in here, we'll add our lines. It's a subtle change, but it will help you when you're running runbooks, that when errors occur, they show up in the outputs rather than in the exceptions. Okay, so we got that. Next is, there's variables I'm mentioning multiple times. For example, key vault. I have it stored as a variable here. But then when you go down here, I got lazy and I just put the key vault's name. I have a variable for it. What I should do is make it key vault name. right? Because it's the exact same value that we had earlier. Let's just double check and make sure that every time key vault, yep, okay, now it is. So why don't we put it at the top? I usually do it below the authentication to Azure because that's the first thing that happens. And I'll make this section, I'll call this section variables. So this is how I like to divide my sections. I like to put a comment like this, indicating that this is another section. So now that I mentioned it here, anywhere else that I'm assigning this, we can remove. And just like that, we'll start building this variables list. The same goes with tenant ID, right? This is only something you need once. And this one's actually using the key vault, so actually is a good one to put right after. We'll do the same here. Anywhere else that's being assigned, let's remove. And again, same problem here. I'm just manually entering the value when I had a variable earlier. It's kind of stupid. That's it. Anytime it needs to mention tenant ID, it's stored up here, and whatever uses it below, we'll be able to use it. Here's another one. I mentioned colors a few times. When I was making my sections that said the word expired or expiring, I had colors mentioned here. And then if you scroll down, I mentioned the same colors here. And if you scroll down, I mentioned the same colors here. So I'm mentioning this 3 times. Why don't we move this into its own variable too? What we can do is call it expired. Let's look for them. Like that. And the reason why we do this is simply if I decided later on, okay, expired is not going to be red, it's going to be a different color. That means I have to go to each of those lines and change it. Whereas now, because they're mentioning a variable, I just change it up here once. Do the same for the other color. I'll just skip ahead. Next thing is clarity. A variable called today. It kind of makes sense, but it wouldn't be better if we just said something like date now. So we're getting the date of what it is right now. Control F. Replace all. This is where you can replace anywhere it says the word today. So I'm just going to put date now, and I'm just going to press this button to replace all. So anywhere where it has the word today, replace it with date now, just like that. Okay, so now let's get to something more interesting. Notice here, I am authenticating. Up to here is actually the same as what I'm doing here. I'm passing in some values, and I'm doing this invoke rest method. Why don't we make this into a function? It's not a function course, so I'm not going to go too deep into it, but since we already kind of touched it before, let's just do that again. And what we want to do is basically take this. I'll write it here for now, but I'll move it after. I'm providing it some values. So these are my inputs. I'm providing these values, and I'm sending these values into this to get basically a token that we can use to connect MGGraph, right? So from here to here is really what's repeating that we could turn into a function. So let's do that. Let's type function, and it will give us a template skeleton. Let's just put all of this in there. And then all of these values, we can just quickly put it as parameters that are being read in. Just like that. And that's it. That's all it took for us to make this function. And then instead of it saying connection, blah, 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 what we can do instead is refer to this as a token and return. Return just means when you run this function, what does it give back? Again, we're going to explore functions in the future. I'll show you how to make them more robust. This is very simple. And just do some formatting, and we should be good to go. So now when we want to call this function, let's give it a name first. We should give it a clear name that indicates exactly what this is doing. What is it doing? It's generating an OAuth token that we can use. So let's just give it that name. Let's say new. By the way, you can write it just like a commandlet. New graph OAuth token. Let's call it this. So now whenever you use this, how you use it is you provide it all these fields. Fields are right here. Name was just for the secret part, so that's not it. But what we need is a tenant ID, which we have stored at the top. And yeah, we can remove all this now. One thing I'll do is call this connection. So it's going to do the exact same process as before. And in my function section, I'm just going to drop that function itself here. We'll give it an explanation. This is function to build HTML table. So now we can use it here as well. Just put this below here, pull this out, and say gen new. All right, now we just saved ourselves some lines. There is one more function we technically can make here. Like I'm sending emails using this API. And then later on, I'm sending emails again. And I'm typing it all out again. I'm going to save this one for another lesson when we dive into functions. This is an example I want to use, and I really want to expand onto how to send emails to simplify it, because as you can see, writing all these JSON-like structures of data within data within data, especially when you want to send emails to multiple people, right? Like you want to CC people or BCC people, it's going to get very long to write. You want to simplify that process so whenever you're using it, it's a lot easier. But let's save that for when we do it, when we do a functions episode. Now, since we're only signing in twice, you can leave these exact same names because this just connects to graph. This one, while it keeps using connection over and over, it's the last thing we're using anyways. Coming back to this section, what if connect mg graph fails? You should really kill the job, because if it fails, it will continue. This is where try and catch comes in. Try just means try something, and if it fails, catch is where it goes. But if it succeeds, it just continues while skipping what's in catch. That's all what these two blocks really do. So I can actually move this connect mg graph here and leaving it exactly as is. The only thing I'll add is error action stop. Error action stop tells PowerShell to immediately halt execution when a command encounters an error instead of continuing. This is great for try and catches, because now we're saying whenever we error out, stop it. And then we come here. And now in the past, I showed you this, right? Let's just take this over. So it's going to do the same thing. When it errors out, it's going to write an error on our output. And then it's going to do a throw, which means it's going to fail the job and it will not continue the script. Because if we can't get into this, there's nothing to be done. So fail to authenticate is very generic. Why don't we expand on this? Because it's always good to have outputs that kind of indicate where things fail. Client ID, and we'll actually put this ID here like that, so that when it shows up, it'll be in square brackets. And this we can leave as is, because this is what's going to hold the exception message. So whatever failed, whatever was the fail itself, it's going to write it after these colons, essentially. And you can write stuff after this too, by the way. Like try doesn't have to have just one item. You can add multiple things. And if any of those fail, you can have an error that talks about whatever failed by just having this part at the end. What I'm going to instead do is do a write output talking about success. Because this works, write output's pretty much guaranteed to work. What we can say is connected to graph. That'll be generic. So what I want to add is if we're connected successfully, we should be able to run this command, get mg context. Why don't I run up to here just to show you? See, it just says connected to graph. I don't want that. What I want is connected to graph as what? So if I do mg context in here, you will see the app name. Perfect. So why don't we do that? We'll just add that in here. And because this is a string, add it like this. Now, if I run this, connected to graph as this identity. This will help us when we're running our script to see, okay, we were able to successfully connect as this identity, and then we moved on and blah, 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 right? That's why we're using write outputs, so that when we're flowing through our automation, it's telling us the story of what's happening and where things are failing and where whatever is happening, so we can pinpoint to our code using that information. Okay, so let me just walk through this, make sure everything's good. We authenticate to Azure, we get our variables, we prime our functions to be used later, and then we do our first connection using that function right here, which was successful. And now we go to collecting our data. The one thing I want to write at every step is outputs, as I mentioned. I'm just going to write one here, which is write output collected da da da. We'll be right here, actually. Sorry. So once all this runs, we get to here. So now that you know how to do tries and catches, you could use them here. You could even use them here. So if they fail to run these commandlets, you can have an error out. But I'm not going to go that deep here. We have a lot to cover. So we go to the next section. What I will do here is instead of a try catch, sometimes you can just use an if statement to make a different kind of action occur. So let's run where we left off and get to this point so we have some data to showcase. Merely targeting this right here. If I run this format list, this is the data we're collecting, right? If this has no values in it, that means that there was no secrets that were either expiring or expired. If that is the case, we're not sending emails out, right? If there's nothing that's expiring or expired, which could happen, let's just end the script, but not as a fail, but as a success. The script will say, okay, I ran and I collected data and nothing was found. I am ending the script as a success. So what we can do here is if.count, get how many numbers of these things we have, right? So .count. These are the apps that have secrets that are expiring or expired. Equals 0. So if this number equals 0, instead of a throw, because that kills a job as a fail, instead of doing exit, which is fine, I'll show you. Let's say if not equals 0, you can actually do return. It's up to you. You want to do exit or return. Now, wasn't return something that was in functions? You're returning a value? Yes. And what return does is when the function is running, as soon as a return key happens, that's when it ends the function. I just so happen to have it here, right? If I had it here, as soon as this function would run, it would collect the parameters and just end the job, right? And that's it. It will not continue forward. Function is a way of exiting with a data being returned. And funny enough, you can think of your script as like the main function, and then the other functions are the functions within it. So all the features that go into functions, you can kind of do it on the top level as well. So we'll just say no secrets expiring within, we had the expiry check. So we'll just use that. I just had an integer, month ending script. So then in the future, when we change 3 months, which is set to right now to 1 month, it will say within 1 month. And that's it. This will end the job if it's 0 and will not continue. But if it does continue, let's write another output. Collected secrets that are expiring or expired that are within 3 months, proceeding. I'm not doing out file anymore. I'm just sending emails. So let's remove that line. This doesn't need to sit here. This can actually sit with its friends right here. I had a table being generated in HTML. I had quote unquote an open HTML, which meant that this is the data that's going to be in the email body before the table. So this will be like the greeting and all that. And then a closed HTML, which will be at the back, right? So I collected all 3 of these things and then I concatenated it as one. We don't need to do all this when we can just put it all together here. Like we can remove this line and this line to make it into one long HTML. And then because we've collected this variable, we can just actually put it right in the middle, right there. And then this is all gone. And then this open HTML is replacement. And that's what's going to be used in the email instead. Exact same thing, just less work. And then let's come here. I'm sending an email out with this API. I have a to field, and then I also have a from field. The first thing is let's actually make this more clear. Sender email. Second thing is maybe let's not call it this. Also call this a variable. I'm just going to put it down here, and we're going to move all of this at the top anyways. Like that. And make sure wherever it has this, place it with the word sender, because this is always going to be sending. Like that. So now we can actually move this to the top, like our other variables, and have it be part of this. So anytime I wanted to change who I'm going to be sending as, I can change it here. And then our department, if you're like, okay, don't send it to yourself, send it to our shared mailbox, I can just type it here too. Right? Rather than having to do it down there. So it kind of helps to have your variables at the top so you can kind of do quick modifications right here without having to like scour and find all the data, right? Now, if I wanted to change how long the script is it 3 months? Is it going to check for 3 months, 1 month? I had something in there called expiry check. Now, if I wanted to modify that in the future, well, I'll have to find it, right? It'd be stupid to have it all the way in the middle here. We can actually just put it at the top. So let's do that as well. And if you want to give it a description, you can do that. This kind of gives color to what all these variables are. Okay. Put all of this together, and you can write output. The next section at this point is to generate HTML table and send emails. So invoke REST method. You should definitely put this in a TryCatch as well. We'll run it like this. We'll do the same thing as before. We'll do error action stop and then out null. And if it succeeds, we'll just put it right output underneath it. And if it fails, do a catch. In the catch, we'll do a write error. Fail to send email to IT staff. Now, if you ever put a colon after a variable, it kind of messes up. Do the same thing that we've been doing every time, which is just this. I gotta show you something. So up until now, we use the exception message, right? This, if we use it here, will not actually give us the data of what happened. What I mean by that is, let me run everything up until this email and show you. Let's get the URI. Now, instead of making this work, let's just put 2 zeros here. Then let's run it. Failed to send email to blah, blah, right? Just like how we wanted it. But the exception is 404, not found. That is an error. It doesn't really give us information. You really want to do? Let's just run it to see what it outputs. Failed to send email. This is the last one we had. But look at this. In message is invalid version, v.00. There is no v.00, it's v.0. This section here will give us the actual error. The problem is this is actually a JSON. So what we will have to do to get that value directly out, because that's all I want. I don't want this whole block, is I'll do convert from JSON error message. Like that. So let's just replace this with this. So whenever you're doing APIs, just use this. It will just get you directly to the problem. If I run this now, fail to send email to blah, blah, invalid version. Okay, going down. Same thing here with the HTML. Let's just delete all these lines. Call this open HTML. This right here. Now we don't need these lines. And we can do the same thing in this invoke message like that. This time, why don't we add one extra right output, sending email to, and I want to use display name like that. Now, one thing I did when I originally made this script is actually send it to the owners while in my development stage. Don't do that. You should only send data out to the users. Either they're part of the test, so they're aware that's going to happen, or you just send it to yourself during the test phase, right? Because if these are working, it will in the email have like the display name. That's enough for my test. I only switch this on when it's time to send it to the actual owners. What I'll do is I'll actually tab this out, comment this out, and then I'll just say I'll send it to myself. So from this point on, this is what we should have done from the start. And I'll write the word to do in capital like this. And the reason is if I ever search this, this will always give me an indication to like follow up and do something about that, right? And maybe when I'm testing, I don't need to send it to everybody, right? What if this was going to hundreds of people and I'm just testing to see if I'm able to send to one, which in theory means it can send to all. So why don't we just put a break here? Then we'll do the same thing, to do. So now when I search to dos, it's like, okay, I got to make this modification. I got to make this modification. It just helps. I have this command to get mg user. Okay, we can do one thing here. Let's remove this user principal name. Like if you ever see user, it's only there for the display name. So why do we even have the UPN? Even though I'm collecting users using get mg user, technically when I was, where is it? Right here. This was getting the user UPN. This is how I originally got it. This also has a display name. So I could have used this. But then that would require me to re-architect a whole bunch of stuff. Let's not waste our time there. But ideally, that's what you should be doing because now I collected all the owners. And just to collect their UPN, their display name, I'm doing get mg user for all of them, right? It's kind of redundant. So that's another thing. If you wanted to improve, you could. But like, who cares? Speed is not the utmost request for this particular script that I need to worry about all these little details. But if you're working with sign-in logs and stuff like that, you got to be really careful because those things are slow. So that you want to make sure it's as fast as possible, and you got to make sure all the little details are right. Whenever you make a script, it's always good to add this section at the top. And yeah, what else? Okay, well, the subjects. Test is not what we're testing anymore. We're ready to showcase that this is a prod ready thing. We collected date now earlier, right? At some point. Let's actually move this to the top because now it's going to be mentioned multiple times. And then let's go to our subject name. Alert, your secrets and Entra ID are expiring. They may get this multiple times. Everybody has secrets expiring, so let's put a date at the end of it. And the same thing for us, wherever it is. This is for the users. The one that comes to IT staff. Alert, let's just call it a report. For Entra ID app secret expiration. Cool. Okay, so now we're ready. Get to the page and do it, add period. Okay, ready to sync. Git push. Okay, cool. It's queued. We just wait for that to finish. Now, the one thing we want to do is change our runtime. And I'll show you something here. Click update runtime. And then the one we created was Corporal PowerShell 7. I'll tell you a problem. It's actually 7.2. I've already installed the graph modules for it, but it won't work. 7.2 and graph on Azure just doesn't like to work. So I would recommend you create a new one. This time create it with 7.4 and then import all the graph modules you think that you need. I just imported a whole bunch, right, as you can see here. So just import all of these, otherwise it's not going to work. Now they're all 7.4s. I'm actually going to delete this one. And if you need a refresher, part 2 talks about this and how to install the modules and all that. So just make sure you get all the graph modules. Unlike the AZ module where you can install all of them, this one requires you to install all the individual sub modules for graph. So yeah, once you have all of that, and this is what I meant earlier when I said that just because something works locally doesn't mean it's going to work on the server. So make sure you have 7.4 on the server. Be prepared for any gotchas that may occur in an automation account. That's why even though when you push it to automation account, have it go to either a test automation account first, or if it is the only place you're doing it from, test it from there. And then once it's good, in theory, then send it to people. So let's do that. And let's run our script. Okay, great. Here are the outputs I was mentioning earlier. Connected to graph, collected app secrets, generated an email to IT staff, sent a full report to me, which would have been the IT staff. Then I sent emails to each individual. There it is. One for the IT staff, and then one for, it just happened to be me that I was testing against for the first one. So that's funny, but let's say we're happy with that. Now what we can do is we can go back to our code and do the final touches. Be the to-dos. So let's remove. Okay, it's done. Yep, the to-do stuff is gone. Run it. And now I should send it to all the people. Perfect. We'll report again. Individual person. Sending it to Lee this time. Sending it to Linda. Sending it to whatever. That covers today's lesson. We look at how we can improve our scripts to make them much more robust for production. Of course, there's always more work to be done. It's never ending in terms of how you can improve a script. Either way, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.